One of my biggest regrets was when I bought the Hulk when it first came out, and about a year later I thought, why would anyone wear a watch with green on it? I like.
I own a Hulk myself, my Eagles watch.
Yeah,
of course, I send it to you every Sunday.
Well, as you know, I'm a Chiefs fan, so
Still not over that one.
No, I know, but.
Hi everyone. Today we've traveled down south to have a mayor time with a very close friend of mine who has been collecting watches for over 50 years and has one of the most interesting, eclectic, and versatile collections you'll ever see from a wide assortment of brands, Jeff Jonas. Jeff, thank you so much for having us here today.
Thanks for coming down and visiting us here.
Very happy to be here. What's super cool about your collection is that there are stories behind almost every watch you have. And you're also a brand agnostic collector, as I would describe. You have no preconceived notions and you're open to everything. So let's get started by talking about how'd you first get into watches? Like how did this whole collecting hobby begin for you?
Well, you know, most of my life I've been doing science and research. And so I became fascinated at an early age about watches and basically the idea that this was a form of art that was made by artists and by people. So I became interested really though when I received my first watch, which was this Hamilton CLD from which my mother gave my father in 1956, and she had the bracelet was custom made, and you don't see many of these anymore.
And you've got some cool engravings on this on both the clasp and the case back, correct?
Right, from my mom to my father. So, you know, when you receive something like this, it sort of ignited an interest in watches as a form of art, and also as something that could have symbolic, you know, things have symbols and symbols have meanings. And a lot of the times as I started collecting, when I started, I didn't have very many means. And so I used to look for watches that really spoke to me in some way. And I've maintained that I'm embarrassed to say, over almost 5 decades now.
Right, and I believe you had this bracelet put on aftermarket, you told me?
This is aftermarket. My mother had it commissioned at a jeweler in the South Shore of Long Island.
Nice, very cool. And then where'd you go from here?
Well, I was quiescent for a long time, and I had spent a lot of, in college, and when I went to med school, I worked my way through, so I started collecting really right in the beginning of med school, and my friends used to joke with me, I had a little box with 4 slots, and I wouldn't buy any more than anything 4. And if I wanted to buy something else, I'd have to sell one because I really wasn't, you know, I didn't have very many means.
Right.
And sometime in the late 70s, I had always known about Rolex and it was a very aspirational brand for me. And one of my friends told me, I don't have it here today because it was one of my early regrets of having sold it. One of my friends said, you know, Rolex makes an Oysterquartz. And so I purchased one of the early Oysterquartz, and I think at the time it was about $500. Which was an immense sum for me. And I kept that for many years. And I was a resident and so forth. And then several years later, really another decade or so, I learned that there were these things called limited editions. Mm-hmm. And I was always quite interested in astronomy. And I was always very interested in science. And I was fascinated by the moon landing. And so I purchased my second watch by trading in my Oysterquartz for the Speedy. And this was the one that came out, the Apollo 11 that came out in 1994, which some of you may remember had the beautiful leather case. And as this was my daily watch for many years.
And I love that you still have it today.
As I say, watches all have significance. And of course, it's a great movement and it's a classic. And again, I think that year they made 2,500 of those, which I guess nowadays, we wouldn't consider, or maybe we would consider it limited.
Right.
And I've kept it because it's still a great watch.
Right. One of the coolest stories from all of your pieces that you have, I think, is involving the Destro Panerai that you have. So tell everyone about that one.
Well, see, I'm a lefty, and which makes me very special. And I was actually on business in Lugano, and I happened to I was in between meetings, and I walked into a bookerer, and I didn't know very much. I still knew a little bit about Panerai, and this was on the shelf. This is the PAM 56 titanium, sitting on the shelf, happy as you please. And I won't tell you what I paid for it because a lot of the times when I used to buy things, you'd get a discount, and this was, of course, heavily discounted because who knew what Panerai was back then?
So even back in Italy, of all places.
In Italy. So and you can see this. I wore this for years. I beat the heck out of it. It's a great watch, obviously very durable. But for me, I was always interested as a left-hander, and I've done this later on in life, looking for watches that could be worn on the right hand. And as you know, there's a lot of mythology about why you wear watches on the non-dominant hand, either because of, you're not less likely to bang them up, or then there's a theory about World War I, which hand you held the rifle with. So there are a lot of mythology about it, but I do wear my watch on my right hand. I have all my life.
So I think that's a perfect segue into another really special left-handed watch that you won't see anywhere else. A very close friend of ours, who was the US president of Vacheron at the time, you told him about how you're a lefty and you wanted to have a special lefty watch. And so at that time, I believe Vacheron had just come out with the 1921, the driver's watch. And they made a special one-off lefty version of the 1921 for you. So talk about this piece, how long it took, the whole process.
So this began with back in the day, this is before watches were popular. It wasn't watches and wonders, it was watches and a few collectors. And this was at a little meeting in Boston at the time, and I met Giovanni, and we were discussing wearing an iWatch plus a watch on two wrists. And as part of that, I said, well, it's easy for me because I'm left-handed, and I love the 1921, and I said, if only you made a 1921. I know that in the early days, they made a version of it for left-handers. And so after I didn't know they would do this, and he said, well, we'll do that for you. He said, it'll take a couple of years. And so we went through a process. We actually went through a process of design. I chose the numerals, the colors, the metal. They gave me a custom deployant. And it was a lot of fun. I had sketches and CAD cams. And they ended up producing this watch, which is one of my favorites. And what's great about it is nobody has a clue what it is.
Right.
And of course, and it's perfect because if I ever were to drive my imaginary McLaren, I could put my hands at 10 o'clock and I could read the time. So this is a special watch. And again, I don't think they've ever made another one, but it's just one of those things you get to do simply because, I love the model and the version, but I couldn't wear it.
Right.
And now I can.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, very few people get to have that level of involvement with the production of a watch from any brand, let alone the longest continually manufactured brand in the world in Vacheron. So that was super cool that they were willing to do that for you. One thing I've seen over and over again with you is you've been very early into brands. Like there's many examples. One of which was F.P. Journe. So now it's considered to be like the hype indie brand. But two watches that you bought when they were trading at huge discounts were the aluminum Centigraphe we have right here, and also the Byblos. So we'll talk about both those pieces, but first let's talk about the first Journe sports watch ever made, fully aluminum movement, aluminum case, aluminum bracelet, some 50-odd grams, 100th of a second chronograph.
You already said it, there's nothing else to say. This is one of the most marvelous sports watches ever made. It was brilliant when Journe made it, and as you said, back in the day, you'd walk into the boutique in New York and you would just buy it.
Right.
Both of the two watches that we have here today, I have many other Journes, as you know, they're just a fabulous piece of art. This is, when you start getting to this kind of horology, which is, in terms of the one who was a 100th of a second, the ease of use, how wearable it is, it's just a fantastic example of watchmaking.
What's interesting is I feel like it's underappreciated and undervalued today. And in a market where there's been this sports watch craze and F.P. Journe's gone crazy, yet an F.P. Journe sports watch is undervalued, it's interesting. But I think maybe it has to do with when it came out. I mean, the guy was really ahead of his time with that watch.
Well, it's funny. Whenever I've purchased a watch, even today, I really don't think think about investment value.
I know.
It's not
That's
how
true.
I'm fortunate now I can buy what I like, but this I liked, and I remember when it first came out, I kept on looking at it, and one of my friends says, it looks like an owl face. And so for about a month, I couldn't look at it again. And then I realized I really liked it. So I was in the city and walked into the boutique, and there it was.
Next, tell us about your wedding watch, Journe.
Where is that here? So the Byblos. Again, purchased at the boutique. It's a long story, but I needed something. Don't laugh. At the time, I wanted something that would go with a linen sports coat. And some of people who are old enough to remember, we used to match metals and we used to match leathers. No one does that anymore. And then, remember we used to wear only a three-handed watch with a tuxedo. So off I went, and again, this was at the boutique, a unique piece, another, fabulous piece of watchmaking by F.P. Journe. And the rest is history. I bought it, and
I know a lot of people who tell me, I could have bought a Byblos out of the New York boutique.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you should have, but...
Yeah, I think, my feeling is if you're fortunate enough to be able to buy things and you buy what you like, you're not going to go wrong. I think it can't be, I know there's a transition in the industry to thinking about these as assets, and I've been fortunate and still don't really view them as assets. They really are they're like art to me.
You buy what you love. I've seen
Really?
it time and time again. A couple of the first watches that I sold you, I think maybe even the first one or one of the first ones was the Grand Seiko GMT Peacock, as they call it. Super cool piece. Love the dial on it. I mean, many Grand Seiko dials are great. Tell us about this one. What attracted you towards it?
Listen, I think as you learn about watches, Grand Seiko is one of the brands that you learn to appreciate. Fabulous manufacturer, durable, and I was traveling a lot, I still do, and I wanted a really reliable, simple travel watch to wear, and of course, I didn't own anything in green, which was very important at the time. And the Peacock is the Peacock. Again, very easy to use, functional. The GMT is useful, and it's a Grand Seiko. So I hate to say this, but at some point when you collect, you start thinking about things that would be important to have in a collection. And having a Grand Seiko was, to me, very important. I have a few others, and they're just great watches and very durable.
You really get a great total package with Grand Seiko. Well-made bracelets, high-frequency movements, good-looking dials, alternate finishes, and at a great value. So fantastic watch there with the Peacock, which has become very collectible, one of the more collectible Grand Seikos, in fact. So one brand that gets knocked on more than it should, and you and I both love the brand, and we call ourselves Hublot apologists. My single favorite Hublot is one you have, the Sapphire Unico Perpetual Chrono.
Firstly, like you say, I am an unapologetic Hublot fan, and I love that people hate it. It's just hilarious to me when I read the blogs and so forth. It's a fabulous movement. It's a great complication. It's easy to wear, and I love the material science that Hublot does and how they apply this. The other thing I really love about this watch is it makes people with OCD crazy because they want the screws lined up. And I find that perplexing. But it's eminently wearable, and it's funny, I own a great deal of watches, I get more comments about this than almost any other watch when I wear it. The easy change band is delightful, it's flexible, you can wear it as your only watch if that's what you want. Great complication, and if you think about, I won't mention any other brands, what this complication would go for with an in-house movement for many competitors, it's not a bargain, but it's a very well-priced watch.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. The Unico movement doesn't get enough credit.
Right.
And then I would say that they have maybe the single best strap changing system. I mean, super easy. It's very, very stable, but then you push the button, pop it off, and I know you have a couple bands for that one to mix it up. Just such a cool, awesome watch.
But you get used to it, and I just love the clear, and it's just such a statement piece.
Yeah, it really is. It's awesome. It's great. So another brand that you were into early, which is a brand that's very near and dear to us at WatchBox now, is Bethune. And in fact, it wasn't even something that we were considering taking a stake in when you bought this Grand Bleu, which has a very unique and special movement, unlike any other.
Well, I was always interested in the independence, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. But first let me say I was very early because I got this at a discount.
You most certainly did.
I don't want everyone, Brian, to be mad at me. But no one really wanted these. It's a fabulous wearing watch. It's ambidextrous, and it has this electrochemical, the illumination, like a firefly. It is a gorgeous piece of engineering. Cool. It's also easy to read, which I appreciate. And the lugs make this, despite the size, which is not too big, makes this eminently wearable. Mm-hmm. But note to them, deployant.
Yeah, no, definitely should be on a deployant. Also need quick release
and
pins
a quick release.
Too. But it's funny, whenever I show the LED lighting, people are always like, "Oh, so it's battery operated,"
right.
And I'm like, "No, fully mechanical movement.
It's brilliant.
The energy's created through the barrels, and something that you just won't see anywhere else because no one else does it."
Right. And in as much whenever you buy a watch for utility, such as it is, it's actually a useful complication. So again,
water resistant.
But I've always liked the independence. It's been a real passion of mine, trying to find makers who are, beside the big brands who are awesome, find makers and people who were not well known. And of course now, I know there's a waiting list for everything.
Right. So another cool one that you picked up, I think De Bethune does colored titanium better than anyone. So they do it with cases, whether it be blue titanium, yellow titanium. This is a Starry Varius with a yellow titanium dial.
Well, this is this is sort of, firstly, light, easy to wear. Very important for me, easy three-hander, right? You can wear it does double duty, and especially if you're not wearing a blue blazer, you can actually use this in a formal setting, but you can wear it with jeans. It's a great everyday watch, and of course, I think they only made 10 of these.
Correct.
So that doesn't hurt. Again, I have a passion for astronomy. I know we'll talk about this later, and I think the whole De Bethune piece about the Starry Varius and the night sky, it's just something that has always resonated with me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can customize the skyline to a certain time and place like I have with mine, or the standard constellation is the skyline in Switzerland when the brand was founded back in 2002. Two other special independent watches that we have here. Another brand you were on to early, when people hadn't really heard about it, Akrivia. And this is a super awesome piece from Recep. Talk to us about this one.
Yeah, our good mutual friend Chris DeBoule at Esper Lux basically introduced me to him. I did some reading about Recep, and at the time, this was, I think, number 7 for the AK-01. This is the tourbillon mono pusher, and they were able to customize what I wanted. This is the silly things you do. I wanted a maroon strap. I wanted a different color face for it, and Recep and titanium. So Recep was very kind enough to do this. And the mono pusher, it's such as it is, a useful mechanism, great mechanics. It's a good look. It's a good looking watch, and I do like the independents partially because not everyone has them.
Right.
I confess, it's there's some great big brands, but it's fun to have a watch which wears well. You have the bumpers on the case, which I like because I wear all my watches.
Right.
And where not everyone has one.
Right.
I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
So,
and they're conversation pieces too. People don't see them often. They're like, tell me about that. Who's behind it? Chris has done an amazing job in promoting a lot of these small independent brands, and now they've become increasingly mainstream in the watch world.
Watch world, this is a great watch. But obviously, Recep is a talented watchmaker. Perhaps on the level someday of DeFore. I think with the De Bethune as well. And it's a privilege to be able to own these kinds of things and to purchase them. I was early with this one.
Yep.
I got it pretty quickly.
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck getting one now.
If Chris is listening or Recep is listening.
Right.
But it's a great watch. So again, another
Awesome.
early independent, which I was fortunate enough to identify.
And then another independent that could be one of your favorites, I mean, without a doubt, is Greubel Forsey. So here's another piece from a band where I'd say it's my single favorite piece that they make. It's the titanium GMT Sport, the latest version, long sold out. This watch is incredible. You have second time zone, world time. They can be set independently of one another, as you and I both know. Obviously, water resistant to 100 meters, an incredible bracelet, one of the best that you'll ever come across. The wearability is just amazing. I know you wear this one a ton.
I wear this a lot. It's a great, I don't want to call it a beater. It has a really fabulous integrated bracelet, and it's very comfortable despite the size. I do a lot of travel. This is an awesome travel watch when you use it, especially if you need to flee the country and have something to sell. But the complications and the dimensionality of the Greubels is something I really appreciate from an aesthetic standpoint. If you look at the globe and the time and the ability to set different time zones, it's extremely functional, very comfortable. The water resistance, I could surf in this if I was nuts, but it really is. I bought an early Greubel years ago when they came out with that steel Balancier.
Yep.
And in fact, I'm wearing one today, the new steel Balancier, the smaller Balancier
39
contemporary,
millimeter.
39
Awesome.
millimeter.
Yep.
I think, again, fabulous independent group. Still a little undiscovered, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I know. Their finishing is maybe the single best. And yeah, it's one of the independents that hasn't fully taken off yet, but I think they will. I think they will.
They make a quality. It's the finishing on a Greubel, I think, may be second to none.
Yeah, I would agree. So as much as you like independents, you do also have an appreciation for the big dogs.
Yeah.
How can you not? I mean, they're incredible at what they do. And I know that early in your collecting, you told me that getting a minute repeater was one of your aspirational goals, right?
Right. It was. I mean, actually, from the day I started learning about watches, my first aspirational goal, someday, I never thought I could ever own one, would be a minute repeater. I mean, in terms of the chiming mechanism, the complications, and the artistry and the manufacture that goes into making a minute repeater. And with all due respect, Patek, you just
in a league of their own.
Nothing sounds like a Patek.
Right. No. Agreed.
So that was always sort of that was my first grail. And the first thing I ever wanted, and you and I did that together.
Yes, it was awesome. And I remember you were back and forth between, do I get the 5078 or the 5178? And we were like, you got to go for the Cathedral gongs.
The Cathedral.
Yeah, and it sounds absolutely incredible. I think we should, wow, look at that. We didn't even set this, and it's at 11:59. It's almost like, right, we had to chime this right now. So let's give this a nice.
It's magic.
Oh, incredible.
Never gets old.
Never, ever. I mean, so soothing.
The best thing about this one is it's so unassuming.
Right.
You can wear this anywhere, and it's a watch that only a watch nut really understands. And it's great. It's great. And it's wearable.
Yeah, no, it most certainly is. And gorgeous, like enamel dial. I mean, it's fantastic. Yeah, again, absolutely love that watch.
Look, we all agree. Patek makes a good watch.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I would say probably the grail of anyone's collection if they're lucky enough to have one. And look, as you said, you're super into astronomy. I've seen the gigantic telescope you have, so I can say firsthand that you're super into it and super passionate about it. And I think, Patek Philippe recognized that, and pretty cool as to why they allocated you this watch. We have the big boy, the 6002 Rose. Talk about this incredible masterpiece, which does everything except maybe, make you fly.
Really? Well, it does. I think, again, I was very fortunate to get the allocation. And you may remind everyone that I had to take a picture of me by my observatory,
right?
Which has been a lifelong hobby and passion of mine as well. I think this is the second most complicated watch they make, but it has complications which nominally are useful to an astronomer. You have sidereal time, the great circle, and the moon phase as it goes in the circle. And again, to me, firstly, you have to wind it every other day because setting this is beyond the scope of normal humans.
Right.
But then every other day I get to visit and I listen. But the utility and the complexity of the enamel work, the metal work, and the scroll work in the case, there is just no other watch like this. I think, I was very grateful that Patek gave me the allocation. And, I don't know what else to say. The watch speaks for itself. For me, it really was the ultimate grail. It sort of had a lot of representations for me in my life, where I started and where I ended up. And there's nothing much to say about it. This is just a masterpiece. It's sort of the Mona Lisa of watches.
Right. Well said. Well said. Yeah, and you're the perfect home for it. I mean, it's cool that you wear it and you're interactive with it and keep it wound, and very, very special. Something you'll rarely see anywhere else. Another watch, a recent release from Rolex. So I remember, I think it was summer of 2022 when Rolex patented titanium. And it was all over the blogs and forums. Of course, anytime Rolex does something, everyone reacts. So we were like, they're going to do a new titanium alloy of some sort, some piece. You're like, I want the first titanium Yachtmaster. I want the first. So here they came out with, it was a shocker, as watches seem to be getting smaller. Here comes Rolex with a 50 millimeter titanium sea dweller. Another one that you wear and can carry.
Right. Well, I wear this all the time. And as you said, I like many people who are really insane, we follow the patents and what gets filed. And when I saw the titanium come out, as you know, I sometimes will ask for things rarely. But this was, I really wanted the first titanium. And I was, I feel like it was an ask for me, and I understood and I was grateful for it. But again, this is, everyone knows about Rolex. And I think, if you're a watch collector, and I've often said this, you go through three phases, right? Which is first, Rolex is your aspiration, you think it, and you only want a Rolex. And then at some point maybe you want this and maybe you want that. Then at some point, I think, as you really learn about watches, you understand what Rolex does. They are the finest mass-producing watchmakers in history. And they make a watch that's basically unbreakable.
Right, yeah, it's
They're
true.
unbreakable, they're reliable.
Indestructible.
Right, they're indestructible. And they're fabulous. You can wear them everywhere. They're instantly recognized. And so for me, I love the technology. Am I going to go down, to the Mariana Trench? No, I'm probably not. But, we go to the ocean. It's bomb-proof. And despite the fact that it's very large, it's extremely wearable. But again, I appreciate you guys giving me the first one that came to you. And for me, it has to do with the passion, like material science, manufacture, high technology. I mean, that's what watchmaking is supposed to be. And for Rolex, Rolex is it's hard to argue anyone does it better.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. I think they're perfect for what they are, and they're constantly striving to get even better.
Yeah.
And they make small little tweaks. They don't ever do anything too much. They don't go, out of their comfort zone or out of their identity. And like you said, people realize, because they're a marketing machine, right? And everyone knows Rolex. I mean, they're one of the most powerful brands in the world in general, let alone in the watch industry. And then, when people realize there are other brands, you're like, Rolex. But then you come back to it, like we've discussed, you come full circle, and Rolex is just perfect.
Right. It's
absolutely
perfect. It's great.
What are your biggest regrets in your 50 years of collecting? There have to be some pieces that have slipped by you, or some pieces maybe that you traded in your early days when you said one had to go out before another could come in because you didn't have the means to accumulate. And I'll give you some time to think about it, because let's go outside for your answer on that.
Especially when I started, I always had to sell something to buy something. I'm not a trader. And so there are a few that I've given up now that I've really regretted. And certainly, I wish I'd kept my original Rolex Oysterquartz for obvious reasons.
Yeah, you always bring that one up.
Always wish I could have that one. The other one I regret bitterly is many years ago, I was in Switzerland, and I was at a work meeting and had lunch. And as a surprise, I had someone arrange a trip to Frank Muller, and I spent the afternoon with the watchmakers at Muller, sort of trying to analogize how designing a watch from concept through CAD/CAM through machining was very much like designing a clinical trial, where you have a scientific idea and then you move on to execution. And as part of that, I purchased a very old master banker, and because I traveled a lot, and I've always been I love travel complications. And several years later, I swapped it out for something else, and I just always regretted that one. That was one I should never have swapped out.
Those were the glory days of Frank Muller.
Oh, it was a fabulous 3-dial watch. Impossible to say. It was fabulous. It was just brilliant.
Well, fortunately, you've made up for it by picking up several other world timepieces that are pretty nice, if I may say so myself.
Well, I've been very fortunate. And then the other, of course, I would buy and sell some Rolexes over the years. One of my biggest regrets was when I bought the Hulk when it first came out. And about a year later, I thought, why would anyone wear a watch with green on it? And I was like,
I own a Hulk myself, my Eagles watch.
Yeah,
I send it to you every Sunday.
Well, yes, I'm a Chiefs fan. So,
Still not over that one.
No, I know, but the Hulk, it was very funny. I was very despondent after about a year or two. And of course, green. I was not terribly prescient about green. And so it's rare I've been able to get a makeup. And so one was I bought the Kermit. I think you know where.
Yep.
And so close, not quite a Hulk. So this I've been enjoying tremendously, especially where I live.
Not a bad recovery.
It was a good recovery. Mm-hmm. And probably the only other watch I've really bitterly missed, which I traded also, was the old Prince Charles Audemars, the old two-tone Royal Oak three-hander. And I swapped that out also. I forgot what I bought with it. And that's another one I wish I could get back. But beyond that, for me, it's always been a thing. It's not about possessing. It's just what I can enjoy. So I don't regret what I don't have. I sort of try to appreciate what I do have. And as you know, I listen to my repeaters. I wear all my watches.
You make the most of all of your watches that you have in your collection. They all get put to use.
Which is why they're all scratched.
Exactly.
Sadly. It's all sadly.
So you and I talk watches all the time, but one thing I haven't asked you is what's next in your watch collecting journey? Like, do you plan the future? I know you have wanted the new Milgauss for years. We thought that could be coming out at the last two Watches and Wonders, and I know you want the titanium Yachtmaster, but anything else?
No, it's a hobby. It's more it is still for fun and appreciation. It's not something I need. I see what comes out. I'm going to continue, we track patents, see what people are patenting, what innovations may come out. But for me, it's mostly
reactive as opposed to
reactive and seeing what, I like to see what new innovations come out, and I'll take it from there.
Love it. Jeff, thank you so much for showing us your collection today, going through all the stories behind why you have the various pieces that you do. And it's great seeing such a eclectic, diverse collection like you've put together. You should be proud of it. A lot of character to it.
Well, I appreciate it. I know it's hard duty to be out here by the ocean, but I appreciate it. It's always good to talk to you. And like you say, I'm sure we'll be chatting about watches tomorrow.
Right. Not a bad way to spend a Tuesday, that's for sure.
Doesn't suck.